Gary Payton wasn't just a point guard. He was a storm in sneakers and killer in the ring.
So I'm killing him.
They called him the Glove because once he locked onto you, escape wasn't an option. He talked, he taunted, he was terrified. To the public, fear doesn't exist in Gary Payton's world, but that's a lie. Because behind that fearless stare were a few players he absolutely hated, players who got under his skin, who embarrassed him and made him question everything he stood for. These weren't just rivals, they were obsessions. And by the end, you'll understand why even the Glove couldn't handle some of these battles. First on the list is John Stockton. When Payton was asked in an interview who he hated guarding the most in the NBA, he didn't hesitate to say he hated him guarding John Stockton more than anybody in the NBA.
So he was very hard for me to guard, and I used to hate going into Utah all the time.
That answer caught everyone off guard. Not Michael Jordan, not Reggie Miller, not even an old rival from his division, but quiet, mild-mannered John Stockton. The man who barely spoke above a whisper on the court. The man who didn't show emotion, didn't react to trash talk, didn't play into Gary's psychological games.
Stockton wouldn't react to your trash talk at all. He would just look right through you and keep scoring.
And that's exactly what drove Payton insane. See, Gary Payton was a volcano of energy. His entire game thrived on noise, loud defense, constant chatter, a relentless rhythm of words and movement that kept opponents off balance. But Stockton, he was calm in the storm, the definition of discipline. He played with surgical precision, like a machine built in Utah to make point guards miserable. Payton would get up in his face, jawing nonstop, calling him every name he could think of. And Stockton would just look through him, not at him, through him. He'd dribble, make the perfect pass, set a hard screen, then run back down the court as if nothing had happened. No reaction, no emotion, just execution. That coldness broke Gary. In his own words, everybody thought Stockton was dirty, but we were just stupid. We didn't know how to play. It took me 6 years to figure him out. 6 years, half a decade, for one of the greatest defenders in NBA history to decode one man's rhythm. Stockton was built differently. He wasn't flashy, he didn't dunk, he didn't cross people up. But he had an unshakable mastery of timing, space, and angles that made him impossible to read. His screens were brutal. His passes, especially to Karl Malone, were lethal. He'd hit you with a subtle shove, slip a perfect dime, and by the time you realized it, your team was down 10 points. What really burned Payton was that he couldn't get to him. Gary thrived on emotion. If you showed frustration, he won. If you yelled back, he fed off it. But Stockton never gave him that satisfaction. He was like a mirror that reflected nothing. And the more Gary pushed, the colder John got. That dynamic became a psychological war, one that Payton admitted he lost more than once. When the Sonics finally beat the Jazz in the 1996 playoffs, it wasn't just another series win. For Gary, it was personal vindication. After years of trying to crack the code, he finally outplayed Stockton, holding him to just 13 points a game while leading Seattle to the finals. But even then, the hate never faded. It wasn't a grudge built on disrespect. It was born out of respect that hurt. Stockton represented everything Gary wasn't. Quiet, composed, efficient, surgical. And that contrast cut deep. Later in his career, Payton even admitted Stockton was harder to guard than Jordan.
Well, you've actually said that John Stockton was harder to guard than Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Coming from Gary, a man who faced every great guard of the 90s, that's not just a compliment. That's a confession. It meant Stockton didn't just beat him on the court, he beat him mentally. He broke through the Glove's grip and made him realize there are some battles you can't win with talk or toughness, only patience and precision. For Gary Payton, John Stockton wasn't just an opponent. He was a lesson in humility, one that lasted an entire career. Second place goes to Michael Jordan. When it came to competition, Gary Payton never feared anyone. But Michael Jordan wasn't just another player. He was the storm, the mountain, the myth. Every man in the league had to measure himself against. And for Gary, the 1996 NBA Finals was his one shot to prove that the Glove could smother his airness. The two went head-to-head in that series, a clash that became the stuff of legend. But early on, it was no contest. Seattle's coach, George Karl, made one of the most criticized decisions in finals history by keeping Payton off Jordan for the first 3 games. Whether it was strategy or fear of foul trouble didn't matter. Jordan shredded Seattle, averaging nearly 31 points per game and putting the Bulls up 3-0. It looked like the series was already over. Then Karl unleashed Payton, and everything changed. From that moment, Gary wasn't guarding Jordan. He was haunting him. He pressed full court, bumped him, talked in his ear, and refused to give him space to breathe. For a man who thrived on breaking opponents mentally, Jordan was the ultimate challenge. And for a short, glorious stretch, the glove made the GOAT uncomfortable. Jordan's shooting dipped to 6 for 19 in Game 4 and 5 for 19 in Game 5 as Seattle clawed back into the series.
But I slowed him down, and we won the next 2 games.
It wasn't just defense anymore. It was personal. Payton wanted Jordan's respect, the one currency that mattered most. And though he never said it, Jordan gave it with his silence. Years later, The Last Dance revived the rivalry when Jordan laughed, that infamous mocking laugh, at Payton's claim that he'd tired him out. It was the laugh of a man who owned the story.
Even with the document when it came out, and he laughed.
Gary shrugged it off, but deep down it burned. Because Payton didn't hate Jordan for beating him. He hated him for making the world forget how close he came to winning. At the 3rd spot is Larry Bird. Before Gary Payton became the glove, the defensive menace every star dreaded, he was just a young, fiery guard trying to make a name for himself. He talked constantly, tried to intimidate everyone, and believed his energy could rattle any opponent. But then came Larry Bird, older, slower, but still lethal, and his mouth was sharper than anyone Gary had ever met. Larry Bird wasn't just a shooter or a scorer, he was a master psychologist on the court. He didn't talk to get under your skin. He talked because he knew he could back it up. Bird was the original trash talker, the kind of player who'd tell you exactly what he was about to do and then do it, effortlessly.
Talk shit to you, but he would tell you what he's going to do to you on the court.
Payton once told a story that perfectly captured it. "We were in Boston," he said. Larry pointed to the corner and said, "Young fella, I'm going to shoot it from that corner right there." He went there, pulled up, all net. Gary just shook his head and said, "Man, I ain't messing with you no more." That moment changed him. Bird didn't just outplay him, he outthought him. For someone like Gary, who made his career destroying opponents' confidence, getting humbled like that hit deep. Bird's game wasn't about flash or athleticism, it was about precision, rhythm, and control. He read the floor like a chessboard, always 2 moves ahead, always calm. Later in his career, Payton admitted that Bird taught him something few opponents ever did: restraint. "That's a veteran knowing how to play," Gary said. "He knew how to neutralize me."
But Larry Bird was cold.
Larry Bird didn't have to silence Gary Payton with dominance. He did it with wisdom. And for the glove, realizing that was worse than any loss on the scoreboard. Sliding into the 4th position is Reggie Miller. If Gary Payton was the loudest talker in the West, then Reggie Miller was his echo from the East. A mirror made of fire and fury. Every time the two met, it wasn't just a basketball game, it was a verbal war zone. The arena turned into a stage for 2 of the greatest trash talkers the NBA has ever seen, and neither man ever backed down. Payton thrived on chaos. He'd get inside your head, break your rhythm, and make you play his game. But Reggie Miller, he was chaos. He didn't just play through noise, he created it. He'd sprint through an obstacle course of screens, stop on a dime, drain a three-pointer, and turn to his defender with that trademark smirk. The kind that burned hotter than the shot itself. Most defenders would lose their cool. Gary Payton? He doubled down. The louder Reggie got, the louder Gary became. Payton once said, "Reggie Miller's trash talk was good, but that doesn't even scratch the surface." Reggie was a master of psychological warfare. He'd laugh after hitting impossible shots, whisper comebacks during free throws, and bait players into frustration until they lost focus. For Gary, who prided himself on being the ultimate mental disruptor, this was infuriating. Imagine two alpha dogs barking from opposite ends of the court, both refusing to yield. Reggie would hit a three and yell, "You can't guard me, glove." The next possession, Gary would strip the ball and scream right back in his face. Fans loved it. Pure entertainment, pure competition. But beneath all the noise, something else was brewing. Payton wasn't used to seeing his own tactics turned against him. Reggie gave him a taste of his own medicine. Every word, every smirk, every dagger, 3 felt like a reflection of himself staring back. The irony wasn't lost on him. Miller was what Payton was to everyone else. Loud, clever, relentless, and completely unshaken by pressure. Their rivalry burned hot through the 90s, each game a mental chess match layered with emotion. And while Gary hated playing against Reggie, he also couldn't help but respect him. Because unlike so many who folded under the weight of Payton's mouth, Reggie never flinched. He talked to it, walked it, and hit it, again and again. In the end, Payton admitted what few could earn from him: respect. He could talk, Gary said, and he could back it up. That's what made Reggie Miller not just an enemy, but an equal. Shaquille O'Neal takes the 5th position. Imagine this. You're 6'4", barely 180 pounds, and you decide to pick a fight with a 7-foot, 330-pound beast who could dunk without breaking a sweat. That's Gary Payton for you. Fearless, fiery, and just a little crazy. Long before they shared the same locker room, Payton and Shaquille O'Neal were enemies in the truest sense. 2 alphas who couldn't stand being outdone, no matter the size difference. Every time their teams faced off, it was fireworks. Payton's mouth never stopped moving. He'd jab at Shaq from tip-off to buzzer, throwing verbal haymakers just to see if the big man would crack. "You can't guard me, big fella," he'd shout. Or worse, he'd take it personal. Shaq once said, "Gary can talk about your mama, your grandmama, and he won't apologize."
Gary will talk about your mama, your grandmama, and won't apologize.
And he wasn't exaggerating. That's how far Payton's trash talk went. Deep, personal, surgical. But one night, it almost went too far. The story has become an NBA legend. The game was tense, the back and forth brutal. Gary was doing what he always did, yapping, poking, testing limits. And finally, Shaq snapped. He was ready to throw hands, right there on the court. The Diesel, the most dominant big man in the league, is about to fight a point guard half his size. But then something unexpected happened. Mama Payton, sitting courtside, locked eyes with Shaq. That one look stopped him cold. Shaq later laughed about it. "I wanted to fight Gary one game, but Mama Payton gave me this look."
I wanted to fight Gary one time at the game because he was talking trash, but Mama Payton gave me this look.
The fight never happened, but the story became folklore. A moment that perfectly captured who Gary Payton was. He didn't care who you were or how big you stood. He was going to get in your head and stay there rent-free. And somehow, that fearlessness earned him respect, even from a giant like Shaq. Years later, when the two became teammates on the Los Angeles Lakers, the tension turned into friendship. They'd joke about those battles in the locker room. Shaq would say, "Gary was the only man who talked that much and still earned my respect." And Payton, never one to admit defeat, would grin and say, "Shaq's the only man who made me shut up." And that's the truth. For a man whose voice never stopped, Shaq was the one opponent who silenced the glove. Not with words, but with sheer presence. That's why Gary Payton never forgot him. Because for once in his career, he met someone even louder than his own legacy. Finally, 6th on the list is Lamar Odom. At the peak of their beef, Payton was no longer the young firebrand from Seattle. He was older, wiser, but still had that same sharp tongue. The one that could slice through the confidence of any opponent. But in this case, that tongue went too far. It happened during Payton's stint with the Miami Heat, a time when his reputation as one of the league's fiercest competitors and trash talkers was already set in stone. The Heat were battling a tough opponent, and on the other side was Lamar Odom, talented, versatile, emotional, and deeply competitive. The two had known of each other for years. Odom, a younger star, respected Payton's legacy, but that didn't mean he'd back down. From the opening tip, they were going at it, trading buckets, bumping shoulders, exchanging words after every play. For Payton, this was just another day at work. He believed trash talk was part of the game, a way to test mental strength, to see who could keep composure when things got heated. But that night, he crossed a line. In the middle of their back and forth, Payton made a cruel comment about Odom's mother, not realizing she had passed away not long before.
"If I knew your mom had passed, I would have never said anything about it."
That single sentence changed everything. Odom froze for a moment, then erupted. He lunged toward Payton, shouting, eyes filled with rage and pain. Teammates and referees had to hold him back. The game continued, but the tension lingered like smoke in the air. Odom couldn't shake it, and even Payton, for all his bravado, knew something had gone horribly wrong. After the game, the story spread quickly through locker rooms and media whispers that Gary Payton, the master of mental warfare, had finally gone too far. Odom reportedly said Payton was extremely disrespectful and that some things should never be said, no matter how intense the competition gets. And he was right. Payton, meanwhile, dropped 21 points that night and even hit the clutch shot that sealed the game. But victory didn't feel like victory. In the quiet after the final buzzer, he admitted to teammates that he felt awful about what he'd said. Later, he reached out to Odom and apologized, not through the media, not for show, but man to man. It was one of the rare times Gary Payton publicly acknowledged regret. That moment stayed with him. In interviews years later, Payton reflected on how trash talk had been both his weapon and his weakness. "You gotta know where the line is," he said. "That night, I crossed it." It was a rare glimpse into the conscience of a man built on pride and competition, a moment where the mask slipped, revealing the humanity beneath the glove. For someone who made his name talking, that night taught Gary Payton silence. It showed him that words could wound deeper than any foul, and that sometimes even legends have to learn humility the hard way. Lamar Odom didn't just challenge Payton that night, he changed him. And for a man who prided himself on being unshakable, that's why this one still haunts him. When you look at all 6 names, Stockton, Jordan, Bird, Miller, Shaq, and Odom, you start to see the pattern. These weren't just opponents Gary Payton hated, they were reflections of him. Stockton showed him patience. Jordan exposed his limits. Bird humbled his pride. Reggie mirrored his mouth. Shaq tested his courage. And Odom revealed his humanity. For Gary Payton, hate wasn't the opposite of respect. It was part of it. Every player he hated made him sharper, smarter, tougher. But deep down, what he truly hated was losing. And those 6 men made him feel it the most. They reminded him that no matter how loud you talk or how strong your defense is, there's always someone who can beat you. In silence, in skill, or in spirit. Gary Payton will always be the glove, one of the fiercest competitors the game ever saw. But these were the players who made him bleed pride, the ones who made even the glove lose his grip. So the question now is simple. If Gary Payton were still in the league today, who would he hate the most in this new NBA era? Because one thing's for sure, the glove never forgets.